Today we are starting The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This book, in the beginning, looks pretty approachable. I mean, it's very skinny, nice, short book. However, I notice that my students really struggle with this. As soon as you open it, you will see that the font is very tight. Everything is very close together here. Thankfully, the chapters are short. We have 1, 2, 3. So, we're going to probably cover 4 to 5 of these little chapters in one of our videos. I just want to point out that there are many different editions of this book. One of them looks like this. This is a much larger edition. And I will definitely refer to some of the content in here. As you can see, there's all kinds of things sticking out. This is actually a book I used in college. It has a lot of additional articles about the time period, and I would say much more thorough footnotes about some of the references here. So I'll definitely be including that when I explain different parts of the story. So the important thing to know here, Kate Chopin wrote this book and had it published in 1899, and it is about the same time period. So the characters in this story are living right at the turn of the century. During this time, it's officially the Victorian Age, and as we head into the 1900s, we're going to be transitioning towards the modern age, which we are going to experience in full force by the 1920s. So some of the topics, in fact, many of the topics that are dealt with in this story will become more prominent in modern society. She was very much a pioneer in this regard, and in fact, when this book was published, it received terrible reviews, and people criticized it up and down for being perverse and disgusting and all sorts of words that I don't think apply to this story at all, especially given our perspective today. But it's just important to recognize that, trailblazers, people who have ideas way ahead of their time, often don't get recognized for them in their lifetime. And that was the case for Kate Chopin. She got acclaim for this book after more so after she had passed away. So in the beginning here, we're starting with a parrot. So the description is of a resort on Grand Isle. And Grand Isle is a real island. It's just off the coast of Louisiana. It's called a barrier island, and it's a vacation spot. And there are all sorts of places to stay there. And during this time period, there is a homeowner named Madame Lebrun who has like a main house that she's turned into sort of like a guest house, sort of central gathering place. And then there are all kinds of little cottages beyond there. So people come and they spend the summer at these cottages, and they can go to the main house for drinks. There's meals there. So it's like a true resort. And so this is the description of the main house, and Madame Lebrun is the owner, and this is her parrot. There's a parrot and a mockingbird in a cage, probably on the porch or something. And the mockingbird is, the parrot is speaking out in French, allez-vous, allez-vous, which means go away, for heaven's sakes, is what he's saying. And then the other character we're introduced to is Mr. Pontellier, who is annoyed by the noise of this bird because he cannot read his newspaper. So we're just getting the setting here. Grand Isle, resort, Madame Lebrun, Mr. Pontellier. He goes back to his own cottage, which it says is the fourth one from the main building near the end. And then he seats himself on a wicker rocker and tries to read the newspaper there. And then we get the reference to Grand Isle, and that originally he is from New Orleans. And so he's a businessman. I'm just going to tell you, he's a businessman in New Orleans, and he and his wife and their children spend the summers on Grand Isle. He goes back and forth to the city to work during the week and then return to the island on the weekends. He's 40 years old. We're getting descriptions here. These could definitely be on quizzes. He's rather slender, a little stooped. His hair is brown, parted to the side. He has a beard that's neatly and closely trimmed. There are references to other kids that are around playing. Two young girls, the Farival twins, so the Farivals would be another family who are spending time on the island, are playing a duet. Madame Lebrun is bustling in and out, giving orders in a high key to the yard boy whenever she goes inside the house. So then they describe Madame Lebrun. Again, quiz questions. She was a fresh, pretty woman, clad always in white with elbow sleeves, so sleeves to her elbows. Her starched skirts crinkled as she came and went. Further down before one of the cottages, a lady in black was walking demurely up and down, telling her beads. So this is another, stark contrast, black and white. This woman is telling her beads. She's probably like she's praying, or she's somebody who's a little bit of a fortune teller. So she's, very different. A good many persons of the pension had gone over to Cheniere Caminada in Bullets Luger to hear mass, so there are people going to church. Some young people were out under the water oaks playing croquet. Mr. Pontellier's 2 children were there, sturdy little fellows of 4 and 5. A quadroon nurse followed them around with a faraway meditative air. So a quadroon is a reference to a woman or a person who would be 1/4 black, so she's mixed race, and so she's like taking care of the children. She's like a nanny, not like a nurse, but a nanny. And his children, 2 boys, ages 4 and 5. He lights a cigar and begins to smoke. Then his wife, Mrs. Pontellier, and young Robert Lebrun come in. So Robert Lebrun is the son of the owner of this resort, and he is a young man. He's not a child. I'm guessing, we might get his age later, but my guess is he's probably in his 20s or something. When they reached the cottage, the 2 seated themselves with some appearance of fatigue upon the upper step of the porch, facing each other while leaning against a supporting post. So Mr. Pontellier sort of scolds them. He's like, what folly to bathe at such an hour in such heat, meaning that they had gone swimming. They're coming back from the beach. So then he sort of criticizes his wife and says, you are burnt beyond recognition, looking at his wife as one looks at a valuable piece of personal property. I starred this because in the Victorian age, women were considered property. They were meant to serve the husband, to be an accessory, to elevate his status as a man. And he looks at her that way, and he's not happy that she is sunburned. She held up her hands, strong, shapely hands, and surveyed them critically, drawing up her lawn sleeves above the wrists. Okay, so I just want to show you something. This is from my other book I was talking about. This is how women dressed in the Victorian age. This is an example of how a woman would dress in the summer. You can see how much clothing there is there. And they would wear an umbrella to keep the sun off their face. When they went swimming, they dressed like this. So here's an example of a swimming costume or swimsuit. And here are other examples of swimsuits. Look at even their legs are covered. So this is the sort of thing that Mrs. Pontellier would be wearing. And so she's got part of her arms covered by cotton. Just so you have a picture of that. She looks at her hands and then is reminded of her rings, which she had given to her husband before leaving for the beach. So she didn't want her rings to fall off while she was swimming. He has been keeping them for her in his pocket, and she slips them on her fingers. And then she looks at Robert and begins to laugh. The rings sparkle on her fingers. He sent back an answering smile. So the 2 of them are kind of flirty, is the impression I'm getting here. And then Mr. Pontellier notices to some degree this sort of back and forth laughing, smiling. And he says, what is it? Asked Mr. Pontellier, looking lazily and amused from one to the other. It was some utter nonsense, some adventure out there in the water, and they both tried to relate it at once. It did not seem half so amusing when told. They realized this, and so did Mr. Pontellier. He yawned and stretched himself, and then he got up, saying he had half a mind to go to Klein's hotel and play a game of billiards. Okay, so he is so disinterested. He doesn't even occur to him that his wife might be sort of flirting with this young man. He thinks they're silly and a waste of time. He is a man of great privilege. He's going to do whatever he wants. He goes to the local hotel, so this would not be Madame Lebrun's main house, but another hotel on the island, to a place where he can gamble. Come along, Lebrun, he proposed to Robert. So he actually invites Robert to go with him to play billiards, go play pool and drink. And Robert says no, he preferred to stay where he was and talk to Mrs. Pontellier. So then he says, Edna, so this is her name. I just want you to recognize Mrs. Pontellier's name is Edna. We'll send him about his business when he bores you, Edna, he says to her. Here, take the umbrella, she exclaimed, holding it out to him. And then she asks if he'll be coming back to dinner, and he shrugs his shoulders. So very aloof about what he's going to do with her or not. He's going to go out and have fun. Maybe he'll be back for dinner, maybe he won't. So you definitely get the sense here that they're a little bit distant. He did not say this, but she understood it and laughed, nodding goodbye to him. So she knows he's probably not going to come back for dinner. Both children wanted to follow their father when they saw him starting out. He kissed them and promised to bring them back bonbons and peanuts. Bonbons would be candies. So, getting a good sense of just the vibe on the island. Okay, now we have chapter 2. Mrs. Pontellier's eyes were quick and bright. So I just want to point out, we're just going to get a bunch of sort of hints to who she is on the inside. Eyes are the window to the soul. So this is who she is. She is quick and bright. She is also strong. She has strong hands. So that's something else that I think is probably different from other women. They were a yellowish brown, about the color of her hair. She had a way of turning them swiftly upon an object and holding them there as if lost in some inward maze of contemplation or thought. So she's deep. She's thinking about things. Her eyebrows were darker than her hair. There's another reference here to how it references the depth of her eyes. So she's deep. She was rather handsome, more so than beautiful. So she has like some masculine qualities. Her face was captivating by reason of a certain frankness of expression and a contradictory subtle play of features. Her manner was engaging. So the main thing here is she is not the typical Victorian woman. She has elements of herself that are more like a man. Robert rolled a cigarette. He smoked cigarettes because he could not afford cigars, he said. He had a cigar in his pocket, which Mr. Pontellier had presented him with, and he was saving it for his after-dinner smoke. This seemed quite proper and natural on his part. In coloring, he was not unlike his companion. So they look similar to each other. Sort of same color hair, same color eyes and complexion. A clean shaven face made the resemblance more pronounced than it would otherwise have been. So he even has maybe like features like her face because he doesn't have any facial hair. There rested no shadow of care upon his open countenance. So he is chill. He is like, because he's younger, he probably has a different attitude about things. He's very easygoing. His eyes gathered in and reflected the light and languor of the summer day. So he's just enjoying life. Mrs. Pontellier reached over for a palm leaf fan that lay on the porch and began to fan herself. And the two of them chattered incessantly. So they talk constantly. They just have all kinds of things to say. And it goes on to say that they talk about themselves, which seems a little childish. There's even a reference that they're a little childish in the way they communicate, maybe even a little narcissistic. Robert talked a good deal about himself. Mrs. Pontellier talked a little about herself too. It says that maybe he doesn't know any better, like that you're not supposed to, in proper company, talk about yourself. So they're kind of breaking social norms a little bit in the way they interact. That's a takeaway. He was spending his summer vacation, as he always did, with his mother at Grand Isle. In former times, before Robert could remember, the house had been a summer luxury of the Lebruns. Now, flanked by a dozen or more cottages, there were always exclusive visitors from the French Quarter, which would be in New Orleans. And it enabled Madame Lebrun to maintain the easy and comfortable existence, which appeared to be her birthright. So she has inherited this property because they've expanded it. She's making money, and so they have this very lovely life. And Robert comes and spends the summer with her. Who knows? We don't know yet what he does. Maybe he's in college or something. We don't know. Clearly privileged. Mrs. Pontellier talked about her father's Mississippi plantation and her girlhood home in the old Kentucky bluegrass country. So this is important too. I mean, they're Southerners. 1899, this is during Jim Crow laws. You know, the Civil War is over, but we still have a tremendous amount of segregation. We also have still very much sort of the agricultural cotton plantation lifestyle in many ways that is a bit of a holdover. And so she grew up in that sort of a life. She reads a letter from her sister who was away in the East and who had engaged herself to be married. Robert was interested and wanted to know what manner of girls the sisters were, what the father was like, and how long the mother had been dead. So this I have underlined because this could be a quiz question. So Mrs. Pontellier's mother died maybe younger than most mothers would have. So then they decide it's time to dress for the early dinner. I see Leonce isn't coming back, she said. So that would be her husband, Leonce Pontellier. Robert supposed he was not, as there were many good New Orleans club men over at Klein's. So a lot of the men who are in business in New Orleans are all hanging out, just like Mr. Pontellier is, at the island for the weekend. So when Mrs. Pontellier left him to enter her room, the young man descended the steps and strolled over toward the croquet players, where during the half hour before dinner, he amused himself with the little Pontellier children who were very fond of him. So he just has kind of ingratiated himself into this family. He hangs out with the kids. He's flirting with Mrs. Pontellier. He enjoys her company. So this next scene is quite a shift from the one we just read. We do not find out what it was like at dinner, but we do find out what it was like after dinner. At 11 o'clock, Mr. Pontellier comes home. He's clearly drunk. He comes in so loudly, talkative, that he wakes his wife, who was in bed and fast asleep. He talked to her while he undressed, telling her anecdotes and bits of news and gossip that he had gathered during the day. From his trouser pockets, he took a fistful of crumpled bank notes, so he had made some money, which he piled on the bureau indiscriminately with keys, a knife, handkerchief, etc. She was overcome with sleep and answered him with little half utterances. So she is sound asleep. I wrote, nice guy. That's sarcastic. What a jerk. He comes in and wakes her up all drunk and loud, throws his money on the dresser, like everyone's supposed to wake up and listen to him. He thought it very discouraging that his wife, who was the sole object of his existence, evinced so little interest in things which concerned him and valued so little his conversation. I wrote, asshole. I mean, come on. It's 11 o'clock at night. She's asleep. So presumptuous. He really does believe that he is the center of the universe. Mr. Pontellier had forgotten the bonbons and peanuts for the boys. So remember, he was going to bring them treats. He didn't do that. But he does love them very much, apparently. So listen to this. He went into the adjoining room where they were sleeping to look at them. And he actually turns and shifts one of the kids in bed. He's fussing with them while they're sleeping. And one of them begins to kick and sort of talk in his sleep because he's sound asleep and having a dream. So then he goes back into his bedroom and says that Raoul, which is one of the children, has a high fever and needs looking after. So, oh my God. He kind of jostles the child, half wakes him up, and then because he's talking in his sleep, believes he has a fever and goes and yells at his wife, literally, to go and check on him. And she says that she's sure that Raoul has no fever. He went to bed perfectly well. Nothing was ailing him all day. And that Mr. Pontellier doesn't know fever symptoms. And he says, absolutely not. That child is consumed with fever. And then he yells at her for her inattention, her habitual neglect of the children. If it was not a mother's place to look after children, whose on earth was it? He himself had his hands full with his brokerage business. So that's what he does for a living. He's a stockbroker. He could not be in two places at once, making a living for his family on the street and staying at home to see that no harm befell them. He talked in a monotonous, insistent way. So he's being very demeaning to her. And again, just the entitlement, which is, he's not unusual. This is very much how society was. And this is what Kate Chopin is showing us. I just want to point out too, that the realism literary movement was about the ordinary daily life of people. And so that's what this story is going to be about. It's the ordinary daily life of this family. Mrs. Pontellier has had it. Fair enough. She springs out of bed and goes into the next room. She comes back and sat on the edge of the bed, leaning her head down on the pillow, and she says nothing. And she refused to answer her husband when he questions her. When his cigar was smoked out, he went to bed, and in half a minute he was fast asleep. So, she went and checked the child. The child's fine. She's exasperated. She feels so belittled. And so he just gives her a hard time and goes to sleep. Of course, now she's thoroughly awake. She begins to cry and wipes her eyes on the sleeve of her nightgown. Blowing out the candle, which her husband had left burning, she slipped her bare feet into a pair of satin mules, which is like slippers, and goes out to the porch. So now it's past midnight. So for an hour, he's been going at her. A single faint light gleams from the hallway. And as she's out there, she just starts to cry. And these are places where you will find evidence for a paper. I think these are just like the real effects that, passive aggressive behavior has on people. And I'm not just talking men versus women. I'm just saying people. When people treat each other the way that Mr. Pontellier has just treated Mrs. Pontellier, they feel very powerless and extremely frustrated. And that's how she's feeling now. She starts to cry. And then here's what's interesting. She could not have told why she was crying. We know why she's crying. Such experiences as the foregoing were not uncommon in her married life. This is what happens all the time. It's how he always talks to her. They never seemed before to have weighed much against the abundance of her husband's kindness and devotion. So I hope he's devoted. We don't really know. But she's, kind of giving herself a hard time that she shouldn't be upset by the way he treated her because, more often he's nice to her and takes good care of her. An indescribable oppression, which seemed to generate in some unfamiliar part of her consciousness, filled her whole being with a vague anguish. This is a very important quote. These are the kind of quotes that build throughout this story and yield and eventually end up sort of influencing the ending. It was like a shadow, like a mist, passing across her soul's summer day. So there's a beautiful simile, very much connected to the environment where they are. It was unfamiliar. It was a mood. So she minimizes it. She was just having a good cry all to herself. That's what she tells herself. Just need a good cry. It's nothing. The following morning, Mr. Pontellier was up in good time to take the Rockaway, which was to convey him to the steamer at the wharf. So he goes back to the shore, and then he's going to take a ferry over to New Orleans, where he will spend the next week. He would go back for business. He had regained his composure, which seemed to have been somewhat impaired the night before. Clearly, he was eager to be gone as he looked forward to a lively week. So this street here Carondelet Street is like the Wall Street in New Orleans. It's like, during this time, this would have been like where the big cotton exchange would be. He gives his wife, Edna, half the money that he had won playing pool the night before. She liked money as well as most women and accepted it with no little satisfaction. So she's clearly very happy to receive the money. So, this is her inner conflict. She is well taken care of. She has a good life. So, should she not get so upset about the way he talks to her? That's the question. And the first thing she says is it will buy a wonderful wedding present for her sister. And then he says, oh, we'll do even better than that for her. So he's very friendly and nice. The boys are tumbling about, like a very lovely picture of family life. He goes back to New Orleans, and a few days later, a box is sent that's full of candy, which he does all the time when he's in New Orleans working. He sends her a gift. Mrs. Pontellier was always very generous with the contents of such a box. So she shared the gifts, like the candy, with her friends. She was quite used to receiving them when away from home. She brings them to the main dining room, and she declared that Mr. Pontellier, or they all declared, I should say, the other ladies on the island, declared that he was the best husband in the world. And Mrs. Pontellier was forced to admit that she knew of none better. So he is very, very, very good to her. And the other women are jealous of her. And yet we have, this juxtaposed moment where she's so, so unhappy and she can't quite understand it. I also made a note here to notice the difference between Robert and Mr. Pontellier. Edna is very much herself with Robert, and with Mr. Pontellier, she is quiet. She is, sort of more obedient, or just says nothing at all. So then we have Mr. Pontellier having a difficult time defining his own satisfaction. He can't figure out why his wife is failing in her duty toward their children. So he can't, he's happy with himself, but he can't figure out why she is not doing what he thinks she should be doing as a wife. He felt it was something he felt rather than perceived. So he can't actually pinpoint that she's doing anything wrong as a mother. He just feels that maybe she's not like the other moms. And then here's a description of why. If one of the little boys took a tumble, he was not rushing to his mother for comfort. He would pick himself up, wipe the water out of his eyes and the sand out of his mouth, and go on playing. So I apologize for my messy writing. Resilient is what that word is saying. These kids are resilient. They are not a mama's boy. They don't cling to her. They don't want her to be constantly, fawning over them. Today, we would say that's a good thing, but he notices that the other children are not that way. And so he acknowledges that she's not a mother woman. The mother women seem to prevail that summer at Grand Isle. Like the other women are more into being a mom. It was easy to know them. They would flutter about with extended protecting wings when any harm, real or imaginary, threatened their precious brood. They were women who idolized their children, worshiped their husbands, and esteemed it holy privilege to efface themselves as individuals and grow wings as ministering angels. So devoted to their children and their husband. Kind of like a combination of like a traditional wife, but also the snowplow or helicopter parents we have today that just want everything to be done for their kids. That's what those women were like. Then he goes on to describe these other women. Many of them were delicious in the roles. One of them was the embodiment of every womanly grace and charm. If her husband did not adore her, he was a brute, deserving of death by slow torture. Her name was Adele Ratignolle. Okay, so Adele Ratignolle. So now let's just run through our characters. We have Madame Lebrun, who owns the property. We have Robert Lebrun, who is her son. We have Edna and Leonce Pontellier, who are the main characters here. Edna is our main character. And then we have Adele Ratignolle, who is one of these mothers who does everything for her children and flutters about. She's obviously beautiful, and this whole paragraph is describing how incredibly gorgeous she is. Obviously, Mr. Pontellier is very attracted to her. I would imagine he has a bit of a crush on her. And Madame Ratignolle is fond of Mrs. Pontellier, so she likes to hang out with her, and she often comes over to the Pontellier's home and does her sewing. On this particular day, she is sewing pajamas for one of her children. They call them night drawers. Mrs. Pontellier is helping her cut out the pattern. Mrs. Pontellier doesn't get it. She's quite at rest concerning the present material needs of her children, and she could not see the use of anticipating and making winter night garments in the middle of summer. So Mrs. Pontellier would not be sewing pajamas for her children on her summer vacation. Robert is here again. He is hanging out with them, sitting in wherever they're sitting, in the living room or on the porch. And I think they're sitting outside, because then Mrs. Pontellier has occupied her former position on the upper step, leaning listlessly against the post. Beside her is this box of candy, which she held out at intervals to Madame Ratignolle. So we get some background about her. She's been married 7 years, and she has 3 children. She's had 2 every year, just about. She's always talking about like what she should be eating and what she shouldn't, for whatever condition. So she's a little bit self-centered, self-conscious perhaps, but it also says she's a little bit overweight. Mrs. Pontellier thought that she had married a Creole. Mrs. Pontellier, though she had married a Creole, was not thoroughly at home in the society of Creoles. Okay, so I just want to clarify. Today, a Creole is a much diluted term to describe the culture and the people of New Orleans. But during this time period, the Creole were people who were descendants of the original French and Spanish settlers who came to Louisiana, and they are aristocrats. So I think it's important to note that Mrs. Pontellier is not Creole, but her husband is. And I would say clearly by these names, they are French descendants. So she finds them to be much more open and a little edgy, it sounds like. A characteristic which was distinguished and impressed upon her was that they had an entire absence of prudery. Their freedom of expression was at first incomprehensible to her, though she had no difficulty in reconciling it with a lofty chastity which in the Creole women seems to be inborn and unmistakable. So they are very blunt. They probably speak very openly about maybe sexual things or desires. So they have like, to be prude is to be very proper. They are not that way. And yet they come across also as devoted and like good girls to their husbands. Like, so there's just a different element to them that Mrs. Pontellier has to adjust to. She talks about being shocked about the women discussing books that they were reading that seemed a little edgy and intimate, and how when she read one of those books, she had to read it in private because she was embarrassed to be seen with it. So there's just, I think this could be a quiz question, like what are the Creole people like? They're a little more self-expressive, a little more maybe sexually expressive, open about sensitive topics. And so eventually Mrs. Pontellier is no longer astonished, and she concludes that these are just wonders that will never cease, and she sort of enjoys these people. So just the main ideas here are the characters and kind of what is unique about each of them, and just start to pick up on some of the conflicts that are within individuals themselves, especially for Edna, and conflicts between people. In this case, obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Pontellier.